The sin that dare not speak its name. That was how the Catholic Church referred to us. Homosexuality was a sin more taboo than rape, incest, or even murder. In 1969, it is essentially illegal to be gay. You were a criminal, you were mentally ill, you had no civil or legal protections. You could lose your home, your family, your job, your freedom, even your life. It was a painful time. Father Nydorf, an Augustinian priest from San Diego, California, had a vision to stop the suppression of gay and lesbian Catholics. He began a ministry in 1969, and that was the beginning of Dignity. Soon after, the Stonewall riots occurred. LGBT people in the United States were not going to take their oppression anymore.
I had no concept at all that Dignity was going to blossom, and play such an important role, I think, in the church. But it sure happened. My thought was help everyone who's interested, let them know that you can be a Catholic and you can be gay and be okay.
Dignity has really transformed how the church writ large addresses sexuality and power. I remember that it was absolutely mind-blowing to people to say the words gay and Catholic in the same sentence.
Shortly after the founding, the members based in Los Angeles requested formal recognition from the Archbishop, and Father Pat was immediately ordered to step down.
No one in the church supported me.
The Dignity members made the bold decision to continue as a lay-led organization. That choice helped shape Dignity into what it is today.
I grew up in an era where homosexuality or lesbianism, bisexuality, it was just invisible. The words were never spoken.
When I was in high school, I had actually, as again somebody had, I pondered suicide. When Dignity came along, it was an opportunity for the first time to be able to connect my sexuality and my faith. That never happened before because the church was always condemning, homosexuality is a sin, et cetera, et cetera. Dignity was saying, no, that's not true.
When they say little things that make you feel like you don't really belong there, So I've always worked towards a sense of belonging somewhere, and I belong in Dignity. That's the way I feel. Sure do. And I want, like I said, I want others to feel that too, because I know that even today, there's still young people that are being asked to leave their homes, and they need a place like Dignity.
Back then, when there were all the little ads, and this was a teeny little ad, it popped out at me, and it said, "Gay Catholics." And I thought, no, gay Catholics. This is in the 70s. And I thought about it for all of 5 minutes and said, I need to go. I went there, and my life has changed. This was the liturgy that I had been seeking.
I was moving to Chicago. I had gotten a new job in there, and I had a guidebook, and I was living with my mother at the time, and she happened to see this and saw this little article about Dignity, Chicago. And she says, oh, here's an organization you should not go near. Well, a couple weeks later, I moved into Chicago, and the Sunday after that, I went to the Dignity Mass, because I did everything my mother told me not to do.
Being in a community where you can be part of who you are and where the messages spoken in the context of our worship and sacraments that are affirming and embracing is just so amazingly healing for people that they just kind of blossom and transform into who they have the potential to become.
Dignity was a place I could go and find support. And Actually, I went in as Lady Bountiful thinking I was going to help these poor gay folks, and discovered that hell no, they helped me so much and have been so meaningful in my life that I just fell in love with them all and stayed with them.
Little did we know what would happen over the years to come.
We really have had the full array of the Vatican machinery and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' Council arrayed against us for most of our existence.
I graduated from Marquette University in 1970 with a degree in journalism and began work at the Michigan Catholic, which is a diocesan newspaper in Detroit, as a columnist and as a staff writer. And when the religion editor of the Detroit News called and asked for an interview because she was doing a story on the church and homosexuality, I consented. The article appeared on a Saturday, and on Monday my column was dropped. And the Detroit Newspaper Guild filed a grievance against the Archdiocese of Detroit on that count. And 2 weeks later, I began a water fast in protest of the sins of the church against gay people. And that lasted for 24 days, at which point the bishops of Detroit issued a statement saying that we have a serious obligation to root out those structures and attitudes which discriminate against gay people. But the following day I was fired.
Dignity decided to support him. This created a bit of tension for the organization because before this, most people saw Dignity's role as one of support. And this then became a question of, was Dignity going to have a role in advocacy, in something larger than in the local community? One of the most significant issues for Dignity was in 1986 when the Ratzinger, sometimes called the Halloween letter, came out. And in the letter, Dignity was described, though not actually named, and Dignity was barred from Catholic spaces unless they adhered to the official Catholic Church's teaching on homosexuality.
This is an extremely traumatic event for many, many people. Because I think at a subliminal level, people who were meeting in Catholic spaces, attending Dignity, etc., sensed an approval, if you will, by the institutional church. And that was meaningful for them. By being kicked out of churches, that was severed.
We refused to be denied our faith, even though we were evicted from church property. I can't think of much that's more spiritually violating than to be told you have to get out of the church, leave our building. However, I think in retrospect, it was a liberation.
That Halloween letter made people really examine what it was that they were getting from the institutional church and meeting on church space and deciding, wait a minute, maybe I'm still okay even without that approval.
We persist. And we survive, and we resurrect every time there's an attempt to push us down.
Another major milestone was when Kevin Caligari, who at one time was the president of DignityUSA, when Kevin very dramatically posted our objections to the statements coming out of the Vatican.
Him walking up to the door and taking this envelope that said, "Return to sender," and just sticking it on the door. That our voice, our presence, our resistance, our rejection of this violence was happening right within the Vatican walls and was seen worldwide. I mean, that was a moment that I think gave so many of us a sense of pride and hope and resiliency.
Dignity, I don't think has ever looked threatening to anybody except the hierarchy in Rome being afraid of losing control. But they couldn't silence us.
That was actually a time when we were losing a lot of our friends, our family, a lot of the leadership, because people were dying so young.
The HIV/AIDS epidemic and the impact that it had on our community was so tough to live through for those of us who were lucky enough to survive it. We lost so many in such rapid succession.
We coped with it in many ways. First of all, we buried our brothers. Secondly, we had our own AIDS ministry where we trained people. It was an intensive training to be caregivers, to be buddies, to clean house, pick up drugs. It was very active.
It was incredibly traumatizing, to watch mostly our brothers, weaken and die. And there was the trauma of dealing with the families, some of whom didn't know their kid was gay or their brother was gay, and then they're finding out he's gay and he's dying like within a matter of days. And Dignity served those families a lot of times.
My partner died of AIDS, and Kenny got very sick, and I worked 9 to 5. There was somebody there every afternoon. And by the time I went to work, somebody from Dignity showed up. And there was somebody from Dignity there when I came home every day in the last few months of his life. So I'm great respect for those people, great love, I couldn't have done that without Dignity.
It was a really tough time.
What was for me remarkable, and it still catches in my throat, is seeing the White House lit up in rainbow colors. The people of my generation who had had administrations who not only ignored LGBT people, but ignored their dying, to finally have an administration who not only acknowledged it, but celebrated this incredible victory. As long as I know, back even into the 80s, Dignity was performing commitment ceremonies for gay couples. And though they had no weight legally, they had a certain sacramental nature to them that people treasured. And as marriage equality began to happen slowly, Dignity began performing marriages.
My presidential suite has already witnessed 3 weddings. Three couples who have been together for 28, 30, and 41 years.
I think Dignity's future in many ways is, while its past is illustrious and while we celebrate 50 years of what I think of nothing less than miraculous, the existence of Dignity, the fact that against the obstacles that Roman Catholicism has put out, that Dignity exists, I think the future is even more important because we've never needed Dignity more than we need it now.
I think of the next generations. They shouldn't have to open spaces the way Dignity has had to 50 years ago, or the way we have had to. And they won't. They'll have their own struggles, of course, and their own challenges and their own visions.
It was naive to think that Dignity wouldn't be needed 50 years later. But that's no reason to give up, because you can see cracks in that iceberg and in that glacier where some people are actually starting to separate themselves from the group. And so I think you're seeing some change.
The call of Dignity is a clarion call to transparency, to honesty, and to authenticity as Catholics.
Dignity was started, 20 years before I was born. It's just incredible to me how much work was done, before I was even conceived, to kind of make the world a better place for me to live in.
It's also important for me as a trans person, and I identify as transmasculine and non-binary. And I know that in almost any Dignity space, I can really be who I am, and I know that people are going to respect my pronouns and respect my history. It was really moving, I think, for both of us, and important to find Catholic community that was also queer. We were honored to have Marianne officiate our wedding. It's probably the best decision about our wedding. Was awesome. But one of the best parts of our ceremony was having Marianne officiate.
I think that Dignity needs to exist because that Catholic hierarchy still exists and is still very hateful.
Speaking of kind of our family background and some of kind of our Catholic upbringing, I think that having Dignity has been it's been amazing to share Dignity actually with our parents. I know my mother really appreciates being able to come to Dignity because she kind of sees it. She's a little more progressive Catholic, and she wants to push for that more inclusive, whether it be on women's issues or sexuality or just kind of the openness of the Catholic Church. She sees Dignity as kind of what the Catholic Church could be.
Queer children, LGBTQI children are still being kicked out of their homes, are still not being, welcomed in their schools. Trans kids are not able to identify as they identify to and live a life that's comfortable. And so as long as this is happening, Dignity has a role, right, to help push forward equality, to express that you are loved, that you belong, and we love you the way you are.
Dignity's message to the larger church and to the whole of society is still every bit as important as it was 50 years ago.
I think our message is always to the full church. And I think it is that we need to stay rooted in what Jesus taught us. It is about serving the poor, serving the outcast, recognizing the dignity of every single individual that is created by God, and that each one of us shows a bit of God's face that the world wouldn't see without us.